how to explain what you do so that people actually buy. Hello, welcome to Beyond Common Business Secrets. I'm your host, Tracy Watts-Serino, and today we're talking about the root cause. We're talking about that root cause of why so many brilliant business owners stay underpaid, undervalued, and that is when they don't know how to explain what they do in a way that actually leads to sales. And I am going to be really blunt with you because I totally respect you. I respect you being here, I respect your time, and I don't take that lightly. So, if you do not have sales, you do not have a business. You actually have a hobby with a logo. And now I know sometimes like that's a lot to take in, but the thing is that for you to actually have a profitable business, you need to have sales. So the real problem, the real problem is that most people think their problem is content or discipline or consistency because that is what all of the gurus tell us, right? Um, oh, you need to create content. Like we're social media. And yes, social media is free, but how are you using your time to create the content? So that is going to be so, so important. And the thing is that if you spend hours thinking about what to post, what your website should look like, what your brand colors are, and what your bio should say, but if your message is unclear, you are just doing yourself such a big disservice because it's literally like you're just decorating confusion. And this is a huge problem that I see so many business owners making. It nobody nobody would do it if we put it this plainly, this clearly. Like, why would you decorate confusion? It's an utter and total waste of time. So, if you look at it through the lens of yeah, you might have the prettiest brand in the world and still not get paid if people don't understand what you actually do. They need to know what you do. They need to know who it's for. They need to know why it matters to them, right? They kind of care why it matters to you, but fast, you need to deliver on why it matters to them. So this is why people will get the oh cool. Oh, that's cool or oh, nice. Nice. When you get that, it's not because you're not good. You actually are brilliant. It's not because your offer isn't valuable. It's because your words aren't doing their job. And when the words you use aren't doing your job, which your job is to sell what you have to offer, that's the point of business, right? So when words aren't doing their job, it is just falling flat because your job is not to explain your whole world. Like in seconds, you are not going to be able to explain everything you do. Your job is only to help the buyer in front of you locate themselves quickly. So, can I see myself in what you have to offer? That is what the buyer that sits before you is asking. Like, that's all they want you to answer. So, they should be able to hear your sentence of what you have to offer and think, that's me. That's my problem. That's literally what I've been searching for on Google. That's what I want. What's next? How do I work with you? That's the feeling that we're looking for when it comes to us just sharing one sentence, like our buyer sentence, with a potential client, a potential buyer. So if they have to work too hard to understand you, then they can't buy. So I always think of all the things in your life where you're like, Oh, I need that. Here's my credit card. How do I work with you? That's like what we're going for. So think of when it was so simple for you to buy, because sometimes when you put it in that context, it makes it so much easier for you to create these, buying decisions because buying is a decision and decisions require clarity. So when you are clear, it makes it so much easier for all the potential buyers that sort of are orbiting around you as you go throughout your daily life to say, "Oh, I want to buy from you. Here's my credit card. How do I work with you?" So you want to think about it in that sense. Like the clearer you are, you make it so simplistic for people to make a buying decision. And that is literally all that business is. It's like that buying decision. So I want to talk to you about something I see all the time. This is like the sea of sameness. So in different industries, and let's just for the sake of, because it's so simple and there's a hair salon in every single community, in every shopping plaza that's within, a 20-mile radius from where everybody lives, there is a hair salon, right? So everyone in that industry does hair. But that's not a message. It's not a message at all. That's a category. So standing out is not about being louder, right? You're not trying to be louder in this sea of sameness. It's about being specific in a way that matters to your potential buyers. So it's like important to ask yourself a series of questions. So, are you the salon for low maintenance luxury, corrective color, curly hair? Maybe you work with postpartum hair loss. Maybe you are exclusive to executive women who need it done fast and done right. Maybe express men's cuts are your thing. You see, I want you to see that this is the same category, right? This is the same category. We're talking about the same thing, right? But all of these things that I've questioned have a different buyer decision. So you have to walk through what you do in that same lens with that same frame. So do you see that? You feel that? And when you're like nodding your head, yes, like I get that. Like that makes it so clear, Tracy. Thank you. So when that happens, then you're like, okay, I understand. So let's take, I have a lot of clients that are coaches and experts in their field. So let's do the same thing with coaching. So, coaching, I'm a life coach, I'm a spiritual coach, I'm a business coach. These are all a label, right? They're a label. It's not a sales message. It doesn't tell me what changes when I work with you. It doesn't tell me why you, why now, and what I should do next to get that. So people may nod, they may like your post, but they keep scrolling, right? So the simple framework that changes everything is what I call it's like a one sentence sales translation. So here's what you need to be able to say in one clear sentence. All right. So for those of you that are not driving, you can take out a pen and pencil and write this down. For those of you that are driving, save this because you'll want to come back to it later. So here's how you create this one sentence sales translation. You clearly define who you help. So who do you help? What you help them do, and what that changes for them. And then to put the cherry on top of the sundae, you add how they can take the next step. So most people speak from inside their expertise. It's like if you're a coach, author, or speaker, you're inside of your expertise and you're like in a jar. And you're inside. And this is why it comes out like marbles in your mouth. Like you have so much to say that you cannot form a clear sentence that makes any sense, right? So you tell them everything, which then can feel like a fire hose. And that doesn't work either. So what you want to do is try to compress, um, or I should say this differently. What you're trying to do is trying to compress years of knowledge and brilliance and all the things you've achieved, all these accolades and all the things that make you so amazing. Because trust me, friend, I know you're amazing. And you're trying to condense all this knowledge into one paragraph. And it's hard. And I get it because I chased that same tail for years myself. And your buyer does not have the patience for that. And there are not enough words to explain your true brilliance like that. So, the clean way, the clean sentence structure that you can use today is I help, right? So you clearly say I help. And then you have a specific person. So I help specific person. Then who is? You state the specific situation, problem, what they might be going through. And then you say words like get, and you give the specific results so they can. And then you share a real life business outcome. And the way I do this is you state your offer, the container, how you work with people. Now you might be scratching your head going, Tracy, wait, slow down. And if you need to, I suggest you save this and go back. But now I'm going to show you mine because I would never ask you to do something that I am not willing to do myself. So here's my example, right? I could say when it comes to, okay, what do you do? I could say things like, I help with messaging. I'm a marketing and business coach. Like, but these are so vague. They're true, right? They are true, but they're vague. And we need something way better than vagueness, right? We need something more juicy, tangible that people would actually care about. So here's a real sentence. If you and I were to casually meet through friends or even chatting it up in line, when I'm getting tea and you might be getting coffee and smiling at each other, we might get into conversation. And um however that works, I would say something like, I help experts, authors, coaches, and service based business owners explain what they do so people actually buy. I translate your brilliance into money messaging that leads to sales without you posting more. So that's what I do. And that's the difference. It's clear, it's specific, it creates a decision where people are like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. I have been chasing my tail and I don't even know how to articulate what I do. Like, how can I work with you? That is what you're looking for, right? And why this matters so much is because this is the root cause of the bigger problem. This is the root cause of the problem because once your message is crystal clear, everything else gets easier. Your website, your website becomes easier to write. It flows out of you then. Your content becomes easier to create. Your sales calls or your consultations, they become so much easier to close once you've clarified this. So overall, this overarching everything in your business changes, your offers become easier to sell. And you stop performing for attention and just start communicating for the results. You're just communicating the results of what you actually do. And then this is how, the buyer language and everything you hear in marketing media, it's like, this is like what then becomes the call to action, the sort of do it now. Because when you are so crystal clear on what you do, who you do it for, how you solve your problem, you're essentially telling them like, hey, this is what I've seen and this is how I help people. And then this is like my unique point of difference. You're sort of hitting all those check marks in such a clean, clear way that people are like, oh, yes, this is exactly what I need. So That's the thing. Now, here's what I want you to do after this episode. So, I want you to truly take a minute to write your one sentence using this structure that I've shared. Then I want you to ask yourself one question. If a stranger read this, would they know exactly what you do and what to do next? Like, do they really know what to do next? Like, how they can buy from you? Because the problem that I see on a daily basis when clients reach out and want me to work with them, the number one thing is that they're like, I feel like I'm doing all this work, but I am not getting the sales that justify the amount I'm working. So when that is a problem, that tells me right away that something is off in your messaging. It's not, oh, we have to hustle harder. Oh, we have to post more. Oh, we need to do more work. It's always like, how do we simplify? You need to refine and simplify your system. You don't need to add more because if you go and create a high level step by step process, system, method, framework before you've even clarified the path for people to give you money for you to make clean sales, you're again just creating more confusion. So this one simple thing, I invite you to not be passive, not don't be just a passive listener. Take what we went through today and put it into action. Write your one sentence offer utilizing this structure. Um, because this is where everything changes for you. You know, your offers will become easier to sell and you'll start communicating the results that you already provide. You have just been struggling to articulate it in a way that buyers are like, that's me. Oh, I'd love to work with you, right? You'll move away from, oh, that's cool or that's nice to, here's my credit card. How do I work with you? So, um, that's what I want you to do next. And then let us know. Inform me how it's going. Reach out to me on social media. I am everywhere at tracywatserino.com. And then if you want to do this yourself, you start here. You start here and you start with this one part. And if you want me to do this for you, if you're like, I am not good in this area, I want somebody that has that real expertise to know what to say that really translates to buyer language, then that like you might want that because you're tired, because you're busy, or because you just don't want another project. You've already been chasing your tail on this for too long. This is exactly what my voice to cash intensive messaging service is. So, voice to cash is an intensive that is completely done for you. I completely do your money messaging translation for you. It's not a long program, it's nothing you have to do or figure out. I take what you do and translate it into clear, simple language that leads to sales. And this is completely done for you in 7 days. You will just have to turn in your stuff. So, your bits and pieces of what you have to offer. And once you turn everything in, this is done for you in 7 days. So you can enroll simply at beyondcommoncoaching.com/V, the number 2C. I will include the link in the show notes, but if you already know, like, this is exactly what I have been searching for, I am sick to death with trying to figure this out, then I encourage you to enroll in the Voice to Cash today. I only take two of these at a time. So will often, you might see like waiting list on the page. When you see that, just put it in and we will get back to you. But know that if it's open and you can enroll, go ahead and enroll, and then we will reach out to you and handle all the rest. So if this episode hit you in a way that you're like, oh, I I have a friend that needs this so bad. Share this with your business owner friend who's brilliant but is still not getting paid the way they should. Please share this on social media. The more people you share it with, the more people we get to help. And if you want me to translate your expertise into money messaging, you know where to find me. I strongly encourage you to enroll in Voice to Cash today. And as always, congratulations for being here. And I will see you on the next one. Take care.